Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving you not only my newest iteration of my Katsu list, but also I'm going to give a full sideboard breakdown for every single relevant matchup, pretty much every matchup in the game right now. We're going to go over this one by one. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video, but I've had so many people ask me for a sideboard guide, and I've never taken the time to actually write it out and do it and give you my general thoughts. So I'm making good on my promise here. We're going to go over it. Hopefully this will be very educational for you and help you at least give you a good starting point. And I'd also like to hear some of your feedback from any other Katsu players out there, any things that you have seen differently. And we'll talk about the list, talk about some choices that we made, and then we'll go into each matchup step by step. I will put timestamps down below so you can go to the matchup you care about most, because if not, this would be a really hard video to watch. But yeah, it's going to be a long one, so buckle up. Let's have some fun, and we'll get right into it. But if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoy your stay. Hopefully you enjoyed this kind of more in-depth content that I'm giving you. If you're a long-standing supporter, thank you so much as always. Feel free to check out the Patreon and the Discord down below. So we'll get right into it. This is my Katsu list post-Lexi. So I decided to make some changes. Lexi now is unofficially living legend. She will not actually be out of the format until November 4th when the ban and restricted announcement is put out. But I wanted to go ahead and do the changes from my original list and kind of talk about my general thoughts of where the meta is going to go. Not super in-depth. We won't do like a meta tier list or anything like here right now. But basically, I want to build my list to help combat against aggro mirrors, because I think there's going to be a lot of Ninja. There's going to be a lot of Fi, a lot of Katsu. I also think there might even be a lot of Dash.io. And then I want to also be able to have a game plan into Iyslander, because I think she's going to come back. Even though Dromai will kind of push her down a little bit, I think she's going to be a good kind of triangle to the meta where, you know, aggro is going to try to prey on Dromai. Dromai is going to try to prey on Iyslander and other decks like that. And then Iyslander is going to try to prey on aggro. So have a game plan to her, as well as obviously have a game plan to Dromai. So that's where my general thought is. Bravo is also in there as well. So this was my original list. Not too much different. The main thing was obviously, like we talked about last time, I forgot to have Lord of Wind in here, but the big key cards that I took out were Warmonger's Diplomacy. I'm just not going to have that in the meta in my list anymore. I know it's really good into Azalea. Bravo, it basically prevents them from dominating, but it's not that big a deal. Warmongers can be useful into Dromai if she has like a heavy dragon hand, but I mean, she's just going to make a bunch of dragons and pass, or she might not even make a dragon. She might just choose War and then hit you with like E-Strike, Rabble into Billowing Mirage, and your Warmongers basically did nothing. So a lot of the top decks in the meta don't care about this card. Obviously, Ninjas don't care, and Iyslander doesn't care. So I actually think the card is going to fall out of the meta pretty significantly post Lexi leaving. Even Lexi's were playing around it very, very easily in the Calling Dallas by Ryan Trench, and being able to avoid getting stuck on a Lexi flip and being able to just choose War and hit you anyway, right? So it prevented Codex and 3 of a kinds, but I mean, they're just going to Arsenal and play it the next turn, so it's not that big a deal. The next big change that I made from my original list is I ended up taking out, I changed up my sideboard a little bit, ended up adding in some different ratios here so I could make room for Lord of Wind, obviously, and basically change out my blues to where now I'm running 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 blues, where originally I was running 17 blues. I felt I was a little bit blue heavy. There's a lot of yellows in this list that can be used to pitch for other cards, not even just Kodachis. So because of that, I wanted to put my blue list down just a little bit, and so I went down to 15 blues. For the sideboard, just to make sure I'm good here, still have the 3 Command and Conquer, still have the 3 Double Strikes, Flick Flax, Oasis Respite, 2 Reinforced Lines. Nothing's changed in the sideboard innately. So that's the list. So the new list, kind of going into it, we have obviously the full Descendant suite. Like I said in a previous video, I think right now having this a couple key points. We'll start from the starter and we'll go all the way to the finisher, right? So 3 Be Like Wires is a really good card in order to force a lot of interaction with your opponent. Generally, it's auto block by them, but if they don't respect it or they just even block it on 3 and you can Ancestral it or Razor it, it's really good, obviously, to start that combo line. When it comes to Surging Strikes, I've been loving having 6 in the deck, especially partnering it with Heart and Cross Strap. You can get these off pretty consistently and easily. It's just creates a lot of threat density in your deck. For the second part of the line, the bonds or, Lord of Wind lines, Descendant Gustwave, we're running 3 red and 1 yellow. I felt 1 yellow was probably the best. Excuse me. Once I went up to 2 yellows, I felt it was a little bit muddied, and I like the fact that we basically have 1 bonds and 1 yellow here. I think this is just enough density on these lines in order to have the most optimization. And then we have 6 Whelming and 2 McGinty Release. McGinty Release is really good. I'm finding turns where you can go into bonds and then finish in McGinty. I've had turns where I didn't have a Surging in hand, and I've done stuff like Descendant into bonds. Descendant hits, I already have bonds in hand, and I'll discard a 0 cost to go get Whelming. I'll pop Breeze Rider Boots. I will have a McGinty in graveyard, and then I will play bonds, go get McGinty by banishing a McGinty from my graveyard, and then end up playing a line like Descendant, bonds, Whelming, McGinty. McGinty hits, go get 2 Lord of Winds, pump it by 3, and then cycle stuff back in. Some really funny lines that you can do by mixing both lines together, and I found that it's been really, really nice overall, and so I'm really enjoying having McGinty in the list. A lot of these are other standard stuff. We have Soulbead Strike is one card that's kind of been in some lists, not been in others. I love the card. I think it's one of the most versatile cards that Katsu has at his disposal. A breakpoint attack late game is so crucial. It's a 0 cost that you can discard for Katsu. It's a 3 block, and it has potential go again, so it forces a lot of interaction with your opponent. Even turns like Kadachi, Soulbead, you force maybe a D-react from them, and then you Ancestral, right? You just got Mask and Ancestral draw, so 2 draws. Really, really good for that. Just really overall, one of your best utility cards, in my opinion, in the deck, and I don't think I'd ever take it out unless we get a really good addition overall. It just does everything you want it to do. Then for blues, we have Flusterfist. I love blue Flusterfist because it's the best card to block with early, or even play early if you play it at the very end of a chain, because I like being able to banish blue Flusterfist in order to go get red Flusterfist, right? I love, you block with this early, and then your first bonds turn, you banish it, play your red Fluster. Then you try to block with another blue Fluster, and then you banish that second blue Fluster, play your second red Fluster. So it basically allows you to have 3 Fluster searches off bonds without having to banish another red Fluster, right? Double up basically on your Flusters. So really good for that. The other blues, Whelming's just really good. Obviously, it partners with the Surging line. Just had a little bit more synergy there late game when you absolutely need it to force a little bit more interaction. We have Dishonor and Lord of Wind, which are the finishers for the main, reason we're running this style of a deck. And then Winds of Eternity to have some good recursion with 100 Winds, and it's just a good 0 for 4 off combo. So that's the main board. Here's a sideboard. We're about to go into the matchup, so I won't go over this in super in-depth, but pretty standard here. Most of the sideboard tech is for aggro mirrors. Or aggro matchups in general. It's for matchups like Bravo, Iyslander, and Dromai. So going into the matchup and sideboard guide, I've never done this before, so I'm doing this the best I can here. So the first one is Arakni. So for Arakni, I put in here board and everything. So you're not going to have it. The only thing you're going to keep out is Heart and Cross Trap, Arcane Lantern, and Tide Flippers. And basically, you win by using key D-reacts and trying to not arsenal key targets. With Assassin in general, you don't want to arsenal your power cards if you can help it. They have so much arsenal hate and arsenal destruction and reactions to get around your D-reacts even. If you have to arsenal one, arsenal it, right? I'm not saying skip your arsenal to not put a good card in arsenal, but if you have the choice between, a Bonds of Ancestry and 100 Winds, to be completely honest, I would pick 100 Winds to arsenal because they have Leave No Witnesses and they have Command and Conquer, whereas, especially with Arakni specifically, the only thing he can do to strip card from your hand, on command, is Surgical Extraction, right? And so I'd rather play my cards with it still being in my hand than being in my arsenal. The ideal things you want to arsenal is your reactions, your reinforced lines, your Oasis, in order to get most efficient blocks possible. The first big key to this matchup is baiting out the assassin equipment when you have reactions and getting them to pop their equipment with little to no help. Being able to make an Arakni pop their boots and their Mask Compare Edition and have no silver is really nice, and it forces them to have to really generate a lot of tempo in order to get their equipment back, because they want to get their equipment back so they can block your breakpoint attacks, because even though they do block very well, They want to keep cards in hand, and you have a lot of breakpoint attacks in this list, right? Like if I have a Surging Strike for 5 into Whelming Gust Wave for 4 into a Bonds for 4, it doesn't matter if they have D-Reacts or not, or 3 blocks or not. If they don't have that equipment to help make up for those breakpoint attacks, it actually makes it really hard for them to block you out and prevent that Katsu trigger, which is another reason why I'm running Mask of Momentum in every single matchup. I don't even have Mask of Pouncing Links in here. I think Mask of Momentum in this style list with all these breakpoint attacks is better. I mean, if you look at the list and if you just go back for, a split second, I think it's going to show everything. So, because we're on Arakni here, but if you look at the only non-breakpoint attacks we have in the list, if you count Descendants as being, let's just say, as being comboed, is Be Like Water, Double Strike, 100 Winds, and I believe, and then technically Whelming Gust Wave when it's comboed, right, in the blues. So, like, as far as your red attacks, the only non-breakpoint attacks are 100 Winds, innately, Be Like Water, and potentially Descendant Gust Wave and Double Strike. But most all the other ones are breakpoints, which makes it really hard for them to block if they don't have their key equipment, right? So that's kind of where you're going. It's a very skill-intensive matchup. Generally, you are favored, but if the Arakni is very seasoned and knows how to block properly and when to block and what to block, it can get a little bit dicey. But typically, I haven't had too much trouble with this matchup overall. The next one is Azalea. Azalea, you are generally, it's a race, right? I know a couple of these are going to say it's a race, it's a race, it's a race. And that sounds very, like no shit, right? But it is, in this matchup, you are going to want to race them unless you have a completely dead hand. You want to bring in your D-Reacts. One key thing is to not get greedy if they fire Remorseless. I've seen so many Katsus like take a 5-power Remorseless to then play out 4 cards for 12 damage. And congrats, they just dealt 9 damage to you on Remorseless, and you dealt 12 damage to them. So yeah, you came out at a 3 life, like a 3 life value, but with Azalea who can disrupt you, like they're okay with that. You don't want to do that, right? Am I saying Remorseless is an auto block every time? No, it's not. But just be careful with Remorseless. Try to not get too greedy against that card. And really, overall, this is a race. What I'm bringing in is typically my D-React, so Flick Flack, Reinforce, and Sink Below. I'm bringing all those in. I'm going up to a 62-card, core, and just, trying to push through damage. They really don't like breakpoint attacks either, and being able to, force out those blocks early is really, really good. So that's kind of where I'm at with Azalea. You're typically not favored into Azalea if they can draw into, good disruption. Then we have Boltyn. Boltyn is typically a race, right? I hadn't put in here on purpose. So for Boltyn, you want to put in your Command and Conquers. They really help threaten Luminas that they like to arsenal. It's also really good against stuff like Soul Shield and Sinks and Fates, which a lot of Boltyns typically are on against you. Some aren't on Soul Shield, but typically they are being very defensive early until they can draw their combos. So Command and Conquer helps, affect that. And then typically I will actually put in Flick Flacks, and I even put in Sink Belows, and I'll go up to 63 cards. I'm okay running 63 cards, but having those D-Reacts and parking one of them in Arsenal and just waiting for the Lumina turn is super nice. What I love doing is, if they have Raiden for 4, being able to sink it and prevent, the life gain and the whole, Boltyn trigger or Lumina trigger, and then being able to block with like a 3-block Ancestral and one of your Battle-Worn pieces, and you block out both their Raiden swings off a single Lumina turn. But your D-Reaction money, save your Battle-Worn equipment for their Lumina turn, and try to prevent one good sword swing minimum, if not both. CNC or Humble is a good alternative for you if you don't have CNCs to threaten their Lumina turns and really stunt them. And it's typically a race unless you have a very defensive hand. Similar to Dory, don't fall into the trap of trying to block Boltyns. You're just going to give them free Boltyn activations and end up getting steamrolled. You kind of have to, use your life as a resource and really race them down. I know that's kind of the typical idea with some of these matchups with aggro Katsu, but it's just how it is sometimes. So hopefully that helps. With each of these matchups that you'll see in this list as you go through after the video, I tried to give you general tips. I'm not going to go like insanely in depth because a lot of thing is hand dependent. A lot of it is, life dependent and setting dependent. So if you have a more nuanced question, please leave in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer it for you and kind of go over that. The next one is Bravo. So Bravo, you're typically going first. Also, really quickly, sorry. Arakni, you want to go first because going second, you prevent them. They want to fatigue you. So if you think about it, if you go second against an Arakni, they're going to force you to block with on hits. So they're going to force you to get rid of cards before you have a chance to attack. So you're like helping their game plan by letting them go first. So you want to go first. If you have a really, really good hand, you can try to push some damage, but typically you just want to Arsenal Pass or filter one card Arsenal Pass. Azalea, you want to go first to prevent them from getting an Arsenal. Boltyn, you want to go first to prevent them from charging their soul or forcing them to crack an equipment in order to do it at least. And then Bravo, you're going to go first in order to prevent getting, Bravo crushed, turn one. So Bravo is not favored, but it is winnable, right? The key to Bravo is really trying to arsenal your key defense reactions and try to hold equipment for Starstruck. Starstruck is the most impactful card they have against you. It is more impactful than Crippling Crush. I've been Crippling Crush before and still E-Strike for 7. Or I've been Crippling Crush before and still done Kadachi, Be Like Water, or Kadachi, 100 wins, and still been able to threaten Mask Momentum and deal 5 damage, right? Like, Crippling is very bad, but Starstruck quite literally time walks you. So you need to be able to defend that with a D-React and a card from hand and one piece of battle-worn equipment. That'll, defending it with a D-React and a card from hands, a 3-block will block the Starstruck trigger, and it's really good, and then you can play out your 3-card hand and continue with your tempo, right? I would rather be Crippling than a Starstruck. So this matchup overall is about forcing bad and awkward blocks. If you see them on Titan's Fist, know that it's probably a more defensive Bravo because they don't care about swinging a Nothos for 6. They're just going to block with 2 to 3 cards, preferably 3, and then swing their hammer for 4, and then try to set up a key attack and arsenal and then pivot when they can. If it's in a Nothos build, and you see a Nothos get flipped, then you know it's probably a more tempo-based build. Regardless, you want to force awkward and bad blocks, and you want to push damage late in the chain, not early in the chain. So there's certain matchups in Katsu, from my opinion and my standpoint, where certain matchups you want to force your damage early in the chain. One of those matchups we'll talk about here in a minute is Iyslander. In Iyslander, you want to present, a combo starter early for a couple reasons. One, to help prevent game disruption on you, but also to force that Iyslander to make a decision early. Against Bravo, they're likely going to have D-Reacts. They're likely going to have 3 blocks. They're likely going to have equipment. And what you want to do is you want to force out those early in the chain, right? Being able to do like Kadachi, Descendant or whatever, when you have bonds, like you're forcing them to either block the Kadachi or block the Descendant. And a lot of Bravos, especially when they have tempo, are going to try to like cheat and block with equipment. And being able to force out those D-Reacts or those equipment blocks early in the chain to then punish them late with damage is probably the best way to push damage. Whereas Iyslander, it's early in the chain because you want them to force them to make a decision and block, when they're not efficient at it early in the chain before they can do their game plan against you. So that's where I kind of have my thought process. Don't rely on taking damage to deal lines that can be covered up with the D-React, right? If you get dealt 8 damage, off a choke slam to then, have a Surging Strike. Let's say you have a Surging Strike, a 0 cost and bonds in hand. You need that Surging Strike to hit for 4 or 5 in order to get the second part of your line. Don't, take some damage to then try to pitch to that Surging Strike to hopefully get the second part of your line. You really have to make sure you have the line in hand if you're going to take damage. Reinforce the line is really good. I've also been playing around with Brush Off is money and should be your primary arsenal target. I'll take Brush Off right now, but I am messing around with Brush Off. We'll talk about that some other time. But right now it's still Oasis. Reinforce and Oasis are money and should be your primary arsenal targets in order to make the most, of your blocking and be able to efficiently swing back. The biggest thing in this matchup that I'm still playing around with is Heart and Cross Strap versus Tunic. I really like Tunic because this game typically does go longer and it's really good to use with Oasis. However, Heart and Cross Strap just allows you to play back hands that you shouldn't be able to play. In that Bravo stream game that I'm going to be analyzing this week, I was able to climb back for 2 reasons. One, I made the calculated risk of blocking with Mask in order to prevent a Starstruck trigger, which ended up working out for me. And 2, on a hand where I had a 2 or 3 card hand, I was able to pop Heart and Cross Strap and pay for a Surging that I had no business paying for and be able to play out a full bonds line when with Tunic, that hand quite literally would have been dead in the water. So I'm still playing back and forth. I'm probably going to end up keeping Heart and Cross Trap in, even though Oasis is far less efficient without Tunic, but I'm still going to mess with it. Right now, I'm on the Heart and Cross Trap plan for sure, so that is Bravo. Next one is Dash.io. Haven't had a ton of experience in this, but have had a little bit. In my opinion, in the current Dash.io builds, this is as aggro can get. You want to push damage and race. Most of the good Dash.io builds right now are just straight aggro. Only time you should think about blocking, in my opinion, is if they have booms out and you have a crappy non-bonds turn, and maybe you should block to try to prevent the boom triggers. But even then, like, they can somehow get around it sometimes. But this is a classic aggro mirror, at least in the early IO builds. Definitely push damage as much as you can. They're going to have items in hand at times, and it's really going to make their blocking inefficient. So if you can draw your good combo pieces, I think generally you're pretty favored in this matchup. Next one is Dorinthea. Dorinthea, in my opinion, is the most knowledge, skill check, one of the most knowledge-based matchups Katsu has. If you know when and when not to block things, what's in their deck, what could certain play lines mean, then you really can basically play around everything Dorinthea has for the most part, right? Dorinthea doesn't have a lot of tricks. She has a lot of tricks, but you know what her tricks are, right? And it's like similar to Katsu, where she's, reactions can really bite you in the butt. But whereas Katsu, like, it's a little bit more mind gaming with Katsu. Whereas Dorinthea, it's like, okay, you have one floating with one arsenal. You either have singing or Iron Song response, or potentially, like, that's about it. That's about your two best targets. So if I overblock by 4, I know I'm good. Or if I don't block at all and I don't trigger singing and you don't have boots and there's nothing you can do about it, like certain things like that. The biggest thing with Dorinthea is I try to make them pop their boots early. If I have decent hands, I'm just going to race them. I'm going to make them have Warrior's Valor every turn, or a glint, or a run through. And if they don't, and they can't give their or go again, then I'm going to make them pop their boots. Once Dorinthea pops her boots, that is a key point in the game. Because if they pop their boots and they cannot push tempo afterwards, they just die. Which is exactly what happened. I beat both Dorintheas I played at the Call in Dallas. And the second one popped their boots like turn 2, because they had to in order to keep tempo. And then after that, they drew 8 reds. Right? And they couldn't effectively do anything. So make them pop their boots early. Basically make them have it. Play around reprise. Don't fall victim to reprise, right? Like if they swing Dawnblade for 3 and they have 1 card left in hand, just don't block. There's no point. There's literally no point. Even if they have boots up, don't block. Because what's the worst case that could happen? Let's say they don't give it go again, which means, guess what? If they don't give it go again, they pop boots, that means they don't have a glint in their hand. That means they probably have a singing or an Iron Song or something, or they have something they can't pay for, right? Make them have the go again. Make them have, the cards, so to speak, and only block when absolutely necessary. Obviously, use your D-Reacts properly and be able to arsenal them and really, pull the wool over their eyes in some situations. But overall, it's a very big knowledge check. Don't fall into victim of blocking unless you absolutely have to. Use your D-Reacts well, and you should be on top. But that matchup is a lot closer now with some of the tools that she got. Then we got the big bad one, Dromai. This is probably going to change over time. Come back and look at this come December, right? Come back and see how this is. I want to see where Dromai is in 2 months. I am writing this as I know Dromai now with the new tone builds. For the tone builds, I prefer to go second. I want to force them to use their gold token turn 1. Typically, from my understanding, if you go second, they will run Wave of Reality against you. If you go first, they will run Seeker's Mitts against you. Is the way I have seen it. But typically, I want to make them use their gold token turn 1 and be able to filter. Yes, their turn 0, they can do some crazy things, but typically, you're basically baiting them to say, hey, are you going to put dragons out? Because if you do, you're just going to give me a free mass trigger on my turn 1, which you don't want to do. Tumultide's a bitch. If you get Tumultide, you get Tumultide. The Dromai I lost to in the Calling Dallas Tumultide me like turn 3 or 4. So nothing much you can do about that. I will say, I think the matchup is 50-50 now. I think the ability to include Dominia and Tumultide into their list without lacking efficiency because of Tome allows them to be a lot more consistent with some like really swingy tempo turns. Even cards like Uvia, which is very inefficient to block out if they Tumultide you, which is exactly what happened to me, are very inefficient to kill without triggering mask, which is exactly what happened to me, it can make the matchup a lot more 50-50 than it used to be. I still think Katsu is slightly favored by all accounts. However, I don't think it used to be pretty significantly favored. I think it's only slightly favored, and I think if the Dromai is seasoned, it's a true 50-50. Some other key points about this matchup: save your Battle Worn 1 equipment, save Breaking Skills and Breeze Rider Boots for Kylorias. I literally don't block with those 2 cards until I see a Kyloria. Then I'll block with a 3 block and a Battle Worn 1, and then kill the Kyloria next turn. Double Strike in this matchup is money. It's the reason I have it in the list. Literally the reason it's in Sideboard is for Dromai, because it efficiently can clear Ashwings and Dragons without expending a ton of card usage. But overall, if the Dromai is good, this is 50-50 base. Just clear the Dragons as you need. The auto clears, right, are Kyloria, Dominia, Tumultai, and cards like Chromai and Miragai. Those are ones you want to clear pretty quickly. The ones you can sometimes wait a turn or two, depending on what your turn looks like, and if you can't efficiently clear it, is stuff like Yindarai isn't as impactful. But overall, you want to just clear Dragons, be as efficient as you can in your sequencing in order to get your mass triggers and get your Katsu triggers on the Dragons, and make sure you're not inefficiently playing lines. Because yes, you can clear Dragons, but you also have to deal damage, right? So what's the least amount of damage I can do while still clearing these Dragons, while then pushing damage late after I clear them, is the key into this matchup. Let's see. Then we have Dorinthea. Dorinthea. We already did Dorinthea. Phi. So Phi, you're going second here. Oh, Dorinthea also, you're going second. Sorry, I keep forgetting to say the first or second thing. Dorinthea, you're going second. You want to try to block out their first counter and then take tempo by going second. Dromai, you want to go second for reasons I explained. Phi, go second. Obviously, it's a aggro mirror, so you're wanting to, take tempo by being the first turn where blocking, isn't as efficient. But this is a true race. Obviously, if you find a lot of Phi in your meta, you could definitely take out, not Brush Off. I was messing with Brush Off for this, so it's Brush Off. An Oasis for a Blazing Yori, which is really good in this matchup. If they're on Mask Momentum, use your Battle Warns to stop Mask early, like when they Kadachi and stuff, and try to keep pressure. If they're on a Lynx plan, I think you're more favored, unless they have some insane turn. It's really hard for them to keep up with you. They're not as consistent as you on Lynx, in my opinion. Do not block a Phi like you do Katsu. They are not the same, right? The only combat trick that Phi may have most of the time is Art of War. Some of them may run Ancestral, like 1 or 2, but it's not common. So if you're going to block, but try not to unless you absolutely have to, right? Typically, you win this matchup now, but this matchup is very dependent on who goes second. Whoever goes second has a very significant advantage. Like, there's no way around it. Then we have Iyslander. So the key with Iyslander, you're running AB2 and you're running Tunic. You're putting in the Oasis and you're putting in the Command and Conquers just to deal some good damage here and threaten their arsenal on turns where they may not have a blue in their arsenal. There's a couple key things with Iyslander. One, you need your own cards on your own turn to push through Disruption. It plays very similar to Azalea. As Azalea, you don't want to pitch on their turn because that's just less cards you have for your Disruption. On your turn, you need to not pitch to Arcane unless you absolutely have to on your turn. To me, this game really comes down to Insidious Chill and Channeling Frigid. If they get one of those 2 cards out early and consecutively, you're in trouble. Like, you're probably losing that game, I'm not going to lie. If they don't, you normally can push through them. Iyslander actually, surprisingly, even though people know it's an efficient deck, surprisingly doesn't block very well. It has a lot of 2 blocks, and they want to keep at least 2 cards in hand most of the time, or 1 key blue. So, they can't just block you out all the time. And you can push through their stuff and avoid like those 2 cards, like a couple Ice Vein turns. You can be really successful. The key with Iyslander, like I said, against Bravo. So Bravo, you want to push damage late in the chain to punish them after they've blocked you. Iyslander, in my opinion, you want to push damage early in the chain because you're wanting to force that decision point of, do I need to block now, before they're able to disrupt you, right? If they have a Channel Lake Frigid arsenal and you do Kadachi, because you're then going to go in a Surging Strike with your last 2 of your blue, and they Channel Lake Frigid you, they just killed your turn. Surging Strike them first, have 1 floating, and they have to expend a whole card in order to play that Channeling Frigid, meaning they have 3 cards left. You still have 1 floating on your blue, which can pay for Descendant even through a Frostbite. You might have to pay 1 additional for that Descendant for 5. But push damage early in the chain to A, punish them if they try to disrupt you and they fully can't, or B, they have to at least think about it, right? Is this disruption worth it? Is it worth putting out this 2-cost blue, right? When they're already presenting 5 damage at me, Chain Link 1. That's one of the key things with Iyslander. I think a lot of people make a mistake. They lead with Kadachi. They lead with like a Be Like Water or lead with 100 Winds. Like if I had the choice between leading with 100 Winds or leading with a Surging, I'm leading with a Surging, right? I'm not going to lead with the 100 Winds. Little stuff like that. Don't rely on leading with your Kachi right to get hold of disruption. Make them make a decision to block or play fast and get them more prone to their mistakes. But the matchup does rely a lot, I think, on Channeling Frigid and Insidious Chill. Next one's Kano, straight race. So this isn't too crazy. The biggest thing is, again, don't pitch on their turn unless you absolutely have to. Even on like Ether Spindle turns, unless you have like 2 blues in your hand, it's a pretty dead turn regardless. If you have 2 blues in your hand, definitely pitch to like a Spindle. But if you don't, like if you're running AB2 and you have 1 blue in hand and you pitch your blue to pay for 2 on the Spindle and they opt 3 instead of opting 5, or let's say they even crucibled it, so they opt 6 instead of opting 4, like, does that really do a whole lot for you, right? You just expanded your blue, which you need on your turn in order to pitch for things, as well as like even discard. You know, you might as well just let them do it. It sucks, but like unless you have like an Oasis in Arsenal and you're able to prevent some of that stuff, I personally most of the time do not pitch unless I have a truly dead hand, like 2 or 3 blues in hand or something like that. It's not going to make a whole lot of difference in the grand scheme of things. Try to find Oasis and park that baby in Arsenal and do not touch it until they combo you. And then you can just prevent them from killing you. It's really, really nice. That's Kano. Then we have Iyslander, Katsu Mirror. So the Katsu Mirror, it's similar to Fi in most cases. What I was putting in was Command and Conquer and Flick Flax. Most of the Go Wide decks I'm putting like Command and Conquer, Flick Flack. But similar to Fi, going second's really key. Whoever goes second has a huge advantage in this matchup. This is a very hard thing to explain. I try to explain it in the paragraph. Hopefully it helps. Pay attention to what a Katsu pitches. I played a Katsu yesterday on stream, in my live stream, and they pitched a Yellow Bonds of Ancestry to play a Surging Strike, right? Which tells me, when they had Heart and Cross Trap up, I believe, which tells me that they don't have the whole line, right? Because if they held the whole line, they would have popped Heart and Cross Trap to play Surging, so then they could play Descendant or Whelming without having to pay for anything, and then play Bonds. Since they pitched the Bonds, that tells me they didn't have everything, right? So if I block that Surging out, they can't discard to go get, Whelming or Descendant. So I ended up blocking Surging. Typically, you don't want to block Surging, but in that situation, because I was paying attention to what they pitched, I was able to discern what they could have in their hand. It doesn't always work out like that, but it's one thing you can pay attention to with Katsu. Another thing is, use your Battle Worn equipment here to prevent Kadachi's early game and prevent those Mask Momentum triggers. That's really good, but typically this is a straight race, and whoever goes second has an extreme advantage, and there's not much you can do about it, to be completely honest with you. That one's pretty simple. Levia, I'm putting, what do we say here for Levia? We're putting in Double Strike and Flick Flack. The biggest thing with this is it's a pretty big race. Levia's, going to do Levia things. If she does Levia things every single turn and is dealing 10 plus damage every single turn with like Dread Screamer and Graveling Growl or something crazy, and then value blocking you, Dread Screamer, Graveling Growl, whatever it may be, case may be, she can really race you down, and Levia can. When Levia is humming. She's a very good deck. However, they can just kill themselves late game. Sometimes you can pivot into more fatigue or more value game plan and really rely on them to turn off Blood Dead every turn. Typically, you are favored in this matchup, but against really practiced Levias, it can get pretty close. And honestly, Levia can just high roll you. She has the capability to do that. So, but typically, you are favored. Nothing crazy there. I mean, what we got? So we got a decent amount. So, Maxx, you're putting in 3 Double Strike, 3 Flick Flack. I like to go first to prevent them from getting their driver engine out early. You need to keep pressure. Sounds obvious, I know, but it's very important, because if they get 2 or 3 drivers out, whether they're on the mech build or not, they can start to play a value game with you and just use drivers to make up the difference, right? They can block with 2 cards, attack with a 0 cost boost card, gain 2 resources, attack with throttle, right? So they can attack for 9 off pretty much 0 resources, and they're able to continue to do that. But from my experience I have right now, you're pretty favored. You race them a little bit better. They can race you down, but it's a little bit harder for them. OG Dash, so no matter the build, I typically go first because I don't want them to start stacking their items, right? Let's say they're on Tree Frog Dash. I don't want them to load all their items in Arsenal Pass. That feels bad. I'd rather do some decent cards, make them block a little bit. Potentially they have an item or 2 or hand, and they kind of take some damage, whatever the case may be. If they're on the aggro boost build or on the pounder build, most good dashes that I've seen are not even starting with pounder. Even when they're on the aggro plan, they start with chamber and they go get pounder with like Spark of Genius for like a mid-game push. So again, go first. Go first. You don't want them to Spark a Genius in a pounder turn 1 after they already have chamber out or something like that. Put in Command and Conquers and Flick Flax. Command and Conquers really good if they're trying to arsenal a high octane. Flick Flax really good for those pesky high octane turns where like they attack with like zipper hit into like another zipper hit or into 0 to 60, allows you to efficiently block. But it's a really unique matchup. Nothing too crazy. It's very situational based off what you have in hand, what they have, how quickly they get their items out, things of that nature. But OG Dash is very good right now, but it's extremely hard deck to pilot, so it is very skill dependent. Prism 2.0, you go first here to prevent them from putting out auras early. You're putting in Command and Conquer for the poppers. I put in Flick Flax as well. And I actually take out Soul Bead Strike in this matchup because it's not as good. But I put in Command Conquers for the poppers. I put in Double Strike because Double Strike's really good against the Figments to be able to pop their ward. If they don't have Spectral Shield up from like Figment of Protection or Wave of Reality, throwing a Double Strike when they have a Awakened, Angel up feels so bad for them because they're gonna have to block with like Footsteps, pitching a card, and then block with another card in order to stop that Angel from being killed. And if you're on a 5-card hand, you still have 4 cards in hand. Like, it's just really bad for them. Then I ended up putting Flick Flax because honestly, blocking out a key Herald is actually pretty nice, especially if you're trying to prevent them from bringing in like Figment of Protection, which is like one of their key win conditions. Also, another key point with this, even though you are favoring this, I have lost to an aggro build of this. Be careful about Art like Sentinel. If you're going to take 15 to the face off of like them playing like Wartune Herald, giving it go again with their wand, their new wand, and then playing another Wartune Herald, like, sweet, took 14. Now my turn to deal 24. And then they hit you with Art like Sentinel and you cry. So be careful on that. I'm not saying you can't take the chance. You can make them have it for sure, but just don't rely on that because you can get blown out overall. Rhinar, this is the least helpful I can give you. Double Strike and Flick Flack, and then you race. Pretty simple. Riptide, but you're putting in Command and Conquer and Flick Flax. This matchup's actually really unfavored if the Riptide knows their stuff. Try not to use reactions like Ancestral Empowerment or Razor unless you absolutely have to. Also, similar to Iyslander, you want to present significant damage early in the chain. You don't want to rely on Kodachis or like small attacks and risk being blown out by like a Tar Pit Trap or a Frailty Trap. Make them have it early and often. Make them block. They have a lot of 2 blocks in their deck because most of the 3 blocks are the traps or the arrows, but they don't want to block with some of their key pumps. So present good damage early in the chain, and you should be in a good spot, but you can't just lose. I think Riptide, a practice Riptide, is actually really good in the aggro right now. Teklovoseen's a meme currently. It's a win. You're just going to push through damage, and they're going to quit. Until this deck is figured out, which I'm sure it will be at some point. I think it's a pretty easy matchup. Then we have our last 3. We have Uzuri, Viserai, and Vynnset. So Uzuri, you want to go second. Riptide, you want to go first to prevent them from getting Arsenal. Rhinar, you want to go first to prevent being intimidated a bunch of times and just taking no damage for no freaking reason. Teklovoseen, you want to go first so they can't instant speed at Evo, or if they want to, they have to say, do I want to take a lot of damage doing it? And Uzuri, I want to go second because I want them to, I want to be able to take tempo as much as I can With Uzuri, I am boarding a little bit extra because I'm going to bring in Command and Conquers as well as all my defensive package. It's a very knowledge-based matchup. If you can get them to burn equipment without having silver or high payoff, it's a huge bonus. A couple key tips to help you is similar to Arakni. Don't be afraid to react and block, right? Wait for your time, make them burn their equipment, and go for it, right? Bait them out. Number 2, try to avoid arsenaling your key offensive pieces. Do not arsenal a key piece against Uzuri. You will pay for it. Very, very hard. Also, if you are going to block with a piece of equipment, do not block. You better be damn sure you can block it. If you see an isolate and you block it, with breaking skills and a D-react, and then they already dead you, bye-bye breaking skills. Be very careful about blocking with equipment on an isolate or on an already dead, unless you are 1,000% sure, even if they shred you, are you going to be able to block this? Otherwise, you're going to lose some key equipment. So it's a very skill-intensive matchup, but if you can get them to burn their equipment without a lot of payoff, that's like the key thing about the matchup. And I think after that, it's actually really hard for Uzuri to efficiently block because she wants to most of the time keep 2 cards. Even like the contract lists want to keep 2 cards. And because of that, it's really hard for her to prevent like an 18-plus damage, Bond's turn when she's trying to keep 2 cards to do like an isolate play or a flip play. So that's kind of how that one goes. Viserai, you want to go first so they can't make rune chance or filter. Even though this is kind of a meme now, there are some minor points. 1, don't pitch to Arcane unless it's meet and greet. And unless you have a bunch of stacked blues in your hand, it won't do much. I like to bring in Sinks and Flickflacks. They're money for like those 1-card 4-power Mauve turns, like they Mauve in a meet and greet or Mauve in the Swarming Gloomveil or Mauve into, Room Flash, whatever the case may be. I know it's like that one's redundant, but whatever like those breakpoint 4-point attacks are, these D-reacts are really good for that. When it comes to sequencing, go first, Arsenal pass unless you absolutely have to filter to avoid them being able to filter. They do have the Rune Blade problem of sometimes drawing brick hands to start, so don't give them that opportunity to fix their hand. The exact same thing with Vynnset. Go first in Arsenal unless you absolutely have to filter to avoid having them filter. This matchup is more of a race. She's trying to freaking hit you down. In my opinion, if you see 2 floating and it's a 6 power, I would just leave it alone. If they pummel you, they pummel you. But some Vynsets aren't running pummel, but most, I think, are, or running at least a couple. And they really do want to set those pummel plays, so you have to be really careful on that. I'm not saying you can't block, just be mindful of it. Also, similar to Uzuri, you don't have to avoid arsenaling key pieces. I'll change the wording on that. Be wary of arsenaling key pieces because they do have pretty decent arsenal destruction. Most of them run Command and Conquer, I think, in widespread destruction. So they do have some good arsenal hate and are able to really give you some issues. Yeah. Hopefully this makes sense as a sideboard guide. I wanted to do it somewhat efficiently and quickly. I tried to give overarching concepts for each one. If you have a question on a more in-depth matchup situation or, what have you, ask me down below in the questions. I will respond to every comment. That's a good, actual helpful question that, doesn't seem like a troll. So definitely let me know down in the comments. This is my day 1 list once Lexi goes away. I mean, it's my list right now, but, post Lexi, this is where I'm at. Obviously, we might make some changes, but overall, this is kind of, where I'm going. 54 card core, typically going to from anywhere from 60 to 65 cards, unless it's Arakni, and really happy with the list so far. But yeah, let me know what you think. Hopefully this was enjoyable and helpful. I really wanted to do a complete sideboard guide for you all and try to give everyone a good starting point. If you're a Ninja connoisseur out there or just a Ninja player in general, and you have something that you disagree with, I know I don't have Art of War in this list. I don't have Pouncing Links in this list. I don't have Snatch in the list. So I don't have some key things that a lot of people do run. So definitely, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear it. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, just make it constructive is all I ask. But yeah, if you like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. If not me, go to our Flesh and Blood career. Leave a like, comment, subscribe on their stuff so we get more people seeing this game. We have so many great careers now. Go give them some love. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time on TC Talk. Y'all have a great one.